The bond is falling apart. I'd like to start off by saying Barakatay Hawa, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Racha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. You just heard the title, The Bond is Falling Apart. And pretty much I'm talking about this whole situation that's going on between, Donald Trump, um, the president, then Vice President Vance, the meeting that they had with President Vladimir Zelensky, and that whole situation with Russia and Ukraine, and how America, the decisions that America is making is pretty much excluding pretty much the whole European, or all those so-called European nations and Ukraine, to sidestep all of them and get straight to Russia and have peace talks about it. Now, I have this article, which I linked in the description box, from NPR News, 5 signs that a U.S.-Europe split is widening. This is dated February 25th, 2025. Oh, our brother sent this to me. I'm not sure who it was. I get a lot of, stuff from brothers, and then sometimes I'll go to them and I won't get a chance to read them at the time. And when I get a chance to, this has to be close to a week now, or maybe 4 days or something like that, 4 or 5 days since the brother sent it. So I didn't get a chance to look at it. And I was reading through it today, and a few precepts came to mind. And this is major prophecy right here, the U.S.-Europe split, because this goes into the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw concerning the statue. And that statue is the representation of the 4 major empires that would rule from that time to the time when Yahweh's kingdom would be established, beginning with the Assyrio-Babylonian Empire. Okay, so I'm gonna read some of this article, see how much we could read. But I wanted to, something towards the very end of this article caught my eye, and I wanted to focus on that first, just to show you that we've been saying this for years. We've been saying for years that America is the head over NATO, over EU, and all of those different, unions that they have. And America has the last say in everything. And America's decisions affect everybody. That's why, as you've heard Elder Pastor use the term hegemony, which they are the head of all of that, of all of these different nations. And this is why they can make an erratic move, like sidestep their allies to go straight directly to Russia and make a deal with Russia, excluding all of those different so-called European nations, and Ukraine. Also says, since NATO's inception in 19 has been the de facto guarantor of European security against threats from the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, and now Russia. So pretty much they're the de facto guarantor. In other words, they're the ones that can determine, if Russia can, or the so-called Europeans could defeat Russia. It all depends on America. And why is that? Because America, scripturally, prophetically, is the one that's running, all of the governments of the world. That's why everything is filtered through here. That's why, even though America is just a patsy, the real power of this whole so-called New World Order is in the hands of the Rothschilds, coming out of the city-state of London, which is the lion with the mouth, the mouth of a lion in the book of Revelation 13. But the U.S. has been the center or the focal point of all major decisions on the planet. So everything comes through America. And this reminded me, when I read that, of the book of Revelation chapter 17, which we're going to get there real quick, and then we're going to come back, because I want to read this here. This is some heavy stuff. So Revelation 17 and 18 It says, and the woman which thou sawest, the woman, when you read from the first verse, is speaking about a harlot. America is a harlot. They're likened to a harlot in the fact that all nations are laying down with her, for financial gain. And all of these nations are like puppets on a string for America, and they have to comply with the American mandates in order for them to receive any benefits from America. So it says, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city, and America is a great city. They call it a country, but it's really a great city, because a city or a country is as big as citizens, U.S. citizens. So it says, and a woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So they have the power over all of the kings of the earth. And that's why I wanted to start off with that point in this article, even though it's at the very end, because if not for America, these so-called European countries would not stand a chance against Russia. And then Vladimir in here was saying that they only provide so many hundreds of thousands of soldiers to it. And he's saying pretty much that Europe doesn't really need them. And he wants Europe to build their own ally or their own union outside of America. So everything is falling apart for America. So we're going to read some of this article and get to some of these precepts. So it says, following the Russian invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago, there were plenty of talk about the revitalization of NATO alliance in response to Kremlin aggression. Those of you who don't know, Kremlin is in Russia. And the NATO alliance are those so-called European nations, which also some of the members, or the members of the EU, are also part of NATO. It says the alliance had grown languid or languishing, like the word languishing, or lacking, or droopy. Like you have a fence to protect a particular property or to separate a particular property, and part of that fence is kind of broken down. Some parts of it is missing, some of it is sagging. Some of the posts are rotted, so they're leaning. One of the posts may have fell, so some of the fence is, sagging down. So that's what the so-called NATO alliance is, So it says the alliance had grown languid, meaning the connection or the confederacy of these different nations. It says in the decades since the Cold War, I believe that goes back to the 50s, its reputation suffered further under President Trump, who during his first term was openly dismissive of NATO, praised Russian President Vladimir Putin, and threatened to withdraw U.S. protection under NATO's Mutual Defense Clause unless European allies increase their defense spending. Right. So he wanted them to spend more on their military budgets, adding to NATO. All right. And they had a mutual defense clause. So if somebody attacked America, NATO would have to get in. If any of those so-called European nations that are a part of NATO got attacked, then everybody would fight. You attack one, you got to attack all. And that was lacking, that relationship. It says, however, after Russia's assault on Ukraine, U.S. military aid began to flow to Kyiv, which used to be Kiev, under the Biden administration, and many of these concerns seemed to fade. Sweden and Finland, who had long stayed out of NATO, reversed course and became members in the last 2 years. Last year, then Secretary of State Antony Blinken declared NATO stronger rather than it's ever been, stronger and larger than it's ever been. It says, but since Trump's election in November, the situation has taken a sharp turn. The Trump administration has resumed criticizing NATO and offering praise for Putin, right? And then you had Vance, Vice President Vance, that went over and pretty much was scolding those so-called European nations, while positioning the U.S. at the center of peace talks aimed at ending the war in Ukraine, negotiations that many fear will either collapse or ultimately harm Kyiv's position When Biden won in 2020, I felt a huge sigh of relief in London and across European capitals, says Michael Cox, a professor emeritus of international relations of the London School of Economics. But with Trump's re-election, Europeans are far more worried this time around than they were previously. Here are 5 developments in the last few weeks that highlight the growing distrust between the US and Europe. And that's why eventually, there's going to come a point where these so-called European nations are going to hate this bitch, America. And that goes to Revelation 17:16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, the 10 horns represent the so-called European Union now, which used to be the EEC, the European Economic Community. They began talks of setting this union together as a financial, hedge from Russia. Back in March of 1957, they got their charter January 1st of 1958. All right. So it says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore." And why will they hate the whore? Because you all of these signs that are happening right now and the erratic decisions that making against the allies. So they're supposed to talk these things out before they come to any conclusions, because they're all supposed to have a say in the matter. But when it comes to decision making, America is numero uno in all the decision making. They're the ones that whatever they say, they get the last word. It doesn't matter if they're outnumbered. It's not a democracy. It's not open for debate. Whatever America decides, everybody has to follow. And that's one of the reasons why they're going to hate this place. So the word there is miseo. It says to hate, pursue with hatred, detest. So they're starting to detest this place. They're starting to hold it in contempt. And down here, it means to love less. All right. So they're starting to look at this place sideways. And why? We see all of the telltale signs that are going down. When America sent sanctions against Russia, and decided not to buy its oil, or I forget exactly all of the details. It didn't affect America as much as it affected a lot of those so-called European countries that got their oil directly from Russia. And I'm not sure if they had pipelines that were going through from Russia to those particular so-called European nations, or how exactly that whole transaction happened. But nevertheless, they were the ones, the so-called European nations were the ones that were getting affected the most by the American decision to sanction Russia. So it says, "In the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire." Right? Because eventually those missiles that these so-called European nations have, they're going to shoot against America. Along with Russia, they're going to shoot their missiles. China, Pakistan, I believe India, and other nations that have those missiles. Eventually, all those missiles are going to be shot this way, whether they want to or not, because the Lord said that his spirit is going to be in the midst of those missiles, because he's going to be guiding those missiles to hit where he wants them to hit, because his name and his word, and his reputation is at hand. And he's not going to mess up, anything. Everything's going to be perfect. Everything's going to be fulfilled perfectly. All right, so let's go back to the article. Matter of fact, let me bring this over here. All right, so there's a lot of distrust between the U.S. and Europe, in so-called Europe. Vice President Vance scolds EU leader. See, this is another reason why they're gonna, or this is one of the main reasons, because they were pissed off when he did that. Trump's return to office has left European leaders on edge about the future of NATO and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. The transatlantic rift was on display in a February 14th speech by Vice President Vance at the Munich Security Conference. So here it is. That's supposed to be so-called Valentine's Day, Lover's Day, and you having this lovers quarrel. The Johns against the harlot. It says where he harshly criticized European leaders, accusing them of attempting to strife right-wing political views. Too many of us, on the other hand, on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old, entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or even worse, win an election, Vance said. In a highly controversial move, Vance also met with Alice Weidel, co-leader of the far-right alternative for Germany, AfD, right, which they're in opposition to any European so-called European decisions. A party notorious for its Nazi era rhetoric and downplaying Germany's responsibility for the not Hulu. Other political parties in Germany have refused to work with the AfD, but after elections held on Sunday, the AfD has now become the second largest party, a significant political shift. In response to Vance's speech, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius shot back. So he was clapping back, huh? This democracy was questioned by the U.S. Vice President earlier, not just in Germany, but in Europe as a whole. If I understand him correctly, he compares conditions in parts of Europe to those under authoritarian regimes, he said. That is not acceptable. So you see how all of these, crevices and cracks are happening. Why? Because that bond is coming apart. Because when they bonded it together with clay. And now that iron that was bonded together by this clay is starting to break apart easily. Zelensky calls for an armed forces of Europe. So this is what he wants. He wants an armed forces of Europe because he's saying you only get about 300,000 troops from America or something along those lines, and you could do without that. That's what he said. He said you don't need America for this. So he's pretty much driving a wedge between. He's one of the factors that's driving a wedge between America and so-called Europe. These NATO and the EU. It says, in response to Vance's speech, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky called for the creation of an armed forces of Europe, saying that without Ukraine's army, European forces alone would not be sufficient to counter Russian aggression. The urgency has grown for European leaders as concerns rise that Trump might bypass both Ukraine and Europe to strike a peace deal with Putin, right? And he's supposed to consult with the so-called European nations because they're all allies. A recent report by the European think tank Bruegel says that Europe would need around 300,000 additional troops, costing some $262 billion, to fully replace the U.S. in defense matters. The think tank concluded that the U.S. numbers are small enough for Europe to replace the U.S. fully. So see? So they're driving that way, saying they're not really providing you that much. All you needed is 300,000, troops, additional troops, and 264, which costs about 262 billion. And pretty much they're saying that they can cover that. That's what they're saying. In so many words, on a roundabout way. Another point is U.S. holds separate talks with Russia over Ukraine. Right. So you have an alliance of America, right, which is a part of NATO. Right. And they're making decisions without the consent of their partners. So that's like a smack in the face. It's like you have a company and you all have say in a company and before you can make a decision, everybody should know about it, but you're going around everybody's back and not even telling them what's going on or letting them know what's going on by them finding out that you plan on making a deal with the enemy or with another corporation that's in direct competition with yours. Says Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently held talks with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Saudi Arabia without Ukrainian representatives present. The discussion appeared to set the stage for peace negotiations, raising alarms in Europe that the U.S. might push for a deal that sidelines Ukraine. Much of Ukraine's defense against Russia has depended on U.S. support. The U.S. has appropriated just under 175 billion since 2022 in response to Russia's war in Ukraine. Trump himself has made clear his stance on Ukraine, stating in a Fox News radio interview that he didn't believe Zelensky was important to the peace process, dismissing the Ukrainian leader as holding no cards, adding, "You get sick of it." Yeah, because they're pretty much just bleeding the economy. Many European leaders worry that Trump's desire to end the war quickly might lead to Ukraine accepting a temporary ceasefire that could allow Russia to rebuild its forces. Following a European Union meeting of foreign ministers in Paris earlier this month, 7 European countries said in a statement that Ukraine and Europe must be part of any negotiations. All right. Next one. German leader questions U.S. commitment to Europe's defense. So you see, these are all different talking points or different wedges in the relationship between America and the so-called European nations. Friedrich Merz, who is poised to become Germany's new chancellor after the elections on Sunday, has expressed serious doubts about the U.S. commitment to NATO. He fears that Trump may abandon NATO's mutual defense pledge, leaving Europe vulnerable. We must prepare for the possibility that Donald Trump will no longer uphold NATO's mutual defense commitment unconditionally. See? So you're supposed to get involved in any one of those European or American conflicts unconditionally. Doesn't matter what the conditions are or why, you know. It says Merz told the German broadcaster on Friday that is why, in my view, it is crucial that Europeans make the greatest possible efforts to ensure that we are at least capable of defending the European continent on our own. So you see what's happening here? There's a wedge being driven, and that's that whole, iron mixed with miry clay, which we're going to get to that in a few. I just want to get to a few more of this. Since NATO's inception in 1949, the U.S. has been the de facto guarantor of European security against threats from first the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, and now Russia. NATO members had pledged to spend about 2% of their GDP on defense by a deadline of last year. And while some have reached or exceeded that goal in recent years, others have fallen short. Now, the Trump administration has asked for spending of 5% of GDP in 2023. The U.S. spent equivalent to 3.4% of its GDP on the military. So what Trump is arguing is that America is spending far more money on the defense of this, of this NATO union than any of those so-called European nations. And some of them are not holding up their end of the bargain. And he wants them to raise the stakes. Says Cox of the London School of Economics thinks the 5% goal the U.S. would like is impossible, but notes that Europeans are genuinely feeling that they need to do more, not just to placate Trump, but also to make a greater contribution to their own security. He also acknowledged that Europe will continue to rely on the U.S. for logistics, intelligence, and subsidies. Another one is at the UN, the U.S. refuses to condemn Russia for Ukraine invasion. Okay, and that's the last part of it. So these are wedges within, the relation between America and NATO, that's causing that whole breakup, to fall apart. So when we go to, and some of those NATO nations, so-called European NATO nations, are also a part of the EU. And that's driving a wedge between the allies of America and between America and their allies. So in Daniel 2 and 40, right, this is the head of the statue, the head of gold, with the toes. And this final part, which is the feet, the legs and the feet, part of iron, the toes part of iron part. But Rome would be revived in the future, because after the revival of the Roman Empire falls for the second time, that's when Yahweh's kingdom would be established. And this is the time that we're in as far as prophecy is concerned. You see? And as far as prophecy is concerned, this is how we know that we don't have much time left before Yahweh comes back. Everything is in place. The prophecies are popping off like popcorn. The technology, the infrastructure of technology has far surpassed anything that has ever been on the planet in any nation. So what more are you looking for? Daniel 2:40. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. Right, and that's what the ancient Roman Empire did, and that's what the new Roman Empire does under the name of America. And this is why with the forces of America and NATO, it says in Revelation that who can make war with the beast. You see, so now these European nations, so-called European nations, are fearing that if America doesn't, back them or whatever the case may be, they won't be able to withstand any invasion from Russia. And Zelensky is driving a wedge, saying they should just come and make a European force, just make a union of Europe and forget about America. You don't really need them. That's what he's saying. So it says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. And this is the point. It's being divided right now. And it's being divided by all of these different talking points, all of these different points of views, all of these different decisions that America is making that's affecting the economic and military stability of these so-called European countries as NATO. And they're worried that this erratic behavior, these erratic moves that Trump is making, shit that Vice President Vance is talking, is going to cause them to not be able to be protected from Russia or from other not allies, but other enemies. All right. It says, but there shall be in it of the strength of iron, right? Because you still have a military. They still have militaries, but they're not as strong as they would be together. It says, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron, and the toes of the feet being the European Union, right, which is the EEC, they, some of those nations, even going back to, what was that 2008 or so, around there, where you had PIGS, PIIGS, which was Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. And these were the major so-called European nations that their economies were failing and affecting the stronger economical so-called European nations like Germany and Sweden and others. You see, that's also a part of the breakup of this image or the toes. It's not just the alliance between America and the military forces, but also their economic basis, which was falling apart. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And if you think about it, if you take iron and you mix it with miry clay and you're trying to build a wall, it's not going to hold, because that iron is strong, but the clay is not. You could throw rocks or you could throw something at that clay, or something could happen to where that clay could just fall apart. And guess what? The whole wall will fall apart. All right. It says, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And we're seeing that we're seeing the breakup of these so-called European nations and the union that they have with America falling apart, and the wedges that are being driven between the relations of the so-called American or U.S. and these so-called European nations, which are supposed to be allies. It says, and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Why? Because ultimately, guy is driving a wedge. Great namesake. Let's go to Proverbs. I know there's two of them. One of them is in Proverbs 16 and 1. This is the preparation of the heart in man, and the answer of the tongue is from Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. So the Heavenly Father is the one that's stirring this up. Even though to the average mind that doesn't know anything, it seems like they're doing it. Lord putting the spirit in them to do it. Let's go to Proverbs 21 and 1. The king's heart is in the hand of Yahweh. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. So the Most High is the one that's orchestrating this, because it's a part of his great movie. And he's going to direct these individuals to go in the direction of prophecy, the Heavenly Father, to fulfill the Heavenly Father's words. And that's what we're witnessing right now. And this is part of the reason that we know that this devil doesn't have much time left, because of the things that are happening, which mirror what the prophecy states. All right. So when we go to Revelation, right, 13, to give you another one, and 1, it says, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. Now, this was the actual beast that the Apostle John saw in the vision. But this beast represented 7 major empires and their allies, okay, or other parts of that empire. And as you read through Revelation, it breaks it down as to what these things represent. It says having 7 heads and 10 horns, right? The 7 heads are the 7 major empires of Esau, beginning with the Greeks and then with the British. And today you have America that's a part of that whole union. It says the 10 horns, which is the European Union, or used to be the EEC, the European Economic Community, when you understand the history of that. It says, and upon his head, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the names of blasphemy, goes into them calling themselves Christians and so on and so forth. Things dealing with the Most High, Yahushua, and the angels, of them showing themselves to be the Most High. These are all parts of blasphemy. It says, and I saw one of, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. The leopard goes back to the beginning of the empire, which goes back into the Greeks. You know, you had Alexander the Greek that wore a leopard skin hat when he would go to war. And, you know, you would have different nations and their leaders or the warriors that would wear, you know, animal skins when they went. You know, you could see coins, I believe it is coins and busts, or coins specifically, that I could remember, of Alexander the Greek wearing these animal skins with the actual mouth or the head, you know, as like a hoodie. So that's the beginning of them, the Greek Empire. And his feet were as the feet of a bear. Now the bear, which is a representation of Russia, was never a part of the beast. But the Russians are going to be the ones that's going to bring down the whole beast system with America. That's the difference. And his mouth, which is where they get their marching orders from, as the mouth of a lion. This representation of the city-state of London, all right, which is the mouthpiece. That's where they get their marching orders from. That's where the Rothschilds' headquarters is at. And they're the ones that's giving out, you know, the different plans for the future of which direction they want everything to go. It says, and the dragon gave him his power, that's the Roman Empire, and his seat and great authority. Why? Because at the end of the day, the empire that you see today of America and the allies all mirror or all come from that union of those 7 heads. It says, and I saw one of his heads as they were wounded to death. This is dealing with the Roman Empire, because during the time of, you know, the Apostle John, when he had this vision, this was the last year of the Edomite rule of that particular empire. But when Jake took it over in 96 AD through Nerva, they still held on to the pagan Roman ways, you know, and that's why it was still in power, even though the power shifted from Esau to Jake. It says, and his deadly wound was healed. When was his deadly wound healed? Beginning with the Renaissance period. That was when their prison sentence was up. When you read Revelation, the 20th chapter, their prison sentence was 1,000 years. When you go back during the time roughly around Constantine to the early to the mid 1300s into the 1400s, that was that 1,000-year period. And that's when the Renaissance started to take hold or foothold, you know, around the earth. And the very first thing they began to do was to put up their images to deceive the whole world. All right. So uh, then from that point, you had the Union of America, where you had the uh, so-called, well, they said that a bunch of the criminals that they had in England, or Britain, they shipped them out, half of them to America and half of them to Australia, and from that point, the ones that were brought to America rebelled against, England, and became what was known as the 13 colonies, which eventually became known as America. It says, and all the world wondered after the beast, right? Because the world was deceived through the Renaissance to wonder after them. It says, and they worshipped the dragon, the Roman Empire, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, which is NATO and the EU, saying, who is like unto the beast, who was able to make war with him. And that's the whole point. No one was able to make war with them when they were together in that union. But now they're falling apart. And now America is pretty much slapping those European nations in the face and not really taking them serious and making decisions that are really affecting them and really pissing them off. But what you see is prophecy, whether it's staged, whether they're actually doing this thing and they're just playing out a script that was given to them by the international banking families. Guess what? It's all a part of the Most High's prophecies, and you can't get around that. So Obadiah, right? Chapter 1, verse 7, it says, all the men of that confederacy have brought thee even to the border, because they're sick and tired of you. Or they're getting sick and tired of you. And this is fueling the fire for that great hatred that the Lord is pushing between the so-called European allies and America. It's fueling that fire. It's fueling that hatred. It's fueling that anger. It says, the men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee. Right, because you deceived them. So they're going to deceive you, because you're supposed to have mutual agreements. You're supposed to have, mutual protection unconditionally. But you're not holding up your part of the bargain, but you're expecting them to hold up their part of the bargain. And prevailed against thee, that they that eat thy bread have laid a wound unto thee. There is none understanding in him. You ain't going to understand why it's happening, because you're so arrogant that you can't see what the hell is going on right underneath your nose. So I want to read this in the NLT, because this is heavy right here. NLT, it says, all your allies will turn against you. They will help to chase you from your land. They will promise you peace while plotting to deceive and destroy you, because they can't stand your guts. It's Daniel 7, it says that your look is more stout than theirs. Your trusted friends will set traps for you, and you won't even know about it. Because you're so stupid. America, the smartest stupid people on the planet. You think because you have this great army and this great wealth that you could do whatever the fuck you want, and there's not going to be any repercussions for it. But little do you know that these your so-called European nations are plotting against you too, unbeknownst to you. What else do I have? Okay, so that was it on that. So you know what? I'll read this again. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Right? So eventually they're going to turn. The Lord's going to put the spirit on them to turn against you, and they're going to burn you with fire, that nuclear fire. This is the reason. For the Most High hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will. Why? Because the kings of the earth's heart is in the Lord's hand. As the course of the river or of the water, he turns it with that soever he wants it to go. Because there's prophecies to be fulfilled. And the Lord is not going to allow his prophecies not to be fulfilled. He's not a man that he should lie. It says, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast. So they're all going to come together, and they're going to come to the agreement that the major problem that we have, which we all knew, we've been known for years, We just kept putting it off, is America. And we got to do something about it. It says, until the words of the Most High shall be fulfilled. And that's the point. The fulfillment of prophecy is what the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, is concerned with. Nothing else. And these are all reasons why we know that we're at the very end. Right? It says, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. That is America, ladies and gentlemen. You know, that is America. All right? That is not the Vatican, and that is not any place else. It is America. All right? And I want to leave you with this precept here in Luke chapter should go right back to it. 21. Yep. And I'm going to start at 25. The point is a little further down. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. And we see all that happening. We see the wars, the rumors of wars, the famines, the pestilences, the uproars of the people. You know, it says men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers or the governments of heaven or of this earth shall be shaken, because they're not going to have the power to withstand the power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And that's what we're waiting for. We're there. We're at the door. What else are you guys waiting for? And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up. When we're seeing all these things happening, we're supposed to look up, not doubt, not give people doubt. Like, well, we know we might still be here another 1,000 years. No, you're supposed to just come straight out. Look, we're at the end. We could be out of here within the middle of this month, the end of this month, the beginning of next year. You're not supposed to be, giving the people, well, we could be here another 50 years, another 100 years, another 1,000. Come on, man. You ain't had enough of this devil? It says, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And we're right there. This is why you see all of these things happening. The Lord is showing all the signs. You either see it or you don't. All right? So you see, this is the 5 signs that the U.S.-Europe split is widening. This is that iron mixed with miry clay. This union that they have is falling apart. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say, Shalom.